Ben. All right. Good to see everybody today. How are you all? Having a good week so far? I hope so. Hey, May. All right. Good. I'm glad you're doing well, Ben. I have a new grandchild on the way. That's always exciting. We just found out it's a boy. So my son already has a little girl, so now she'll have a brother. Thank you. Thank you. New babies are always fun. Always fun, especially when you're an anatomy teacher. I'm telling my daughter-in-law all the time what's happening. Oh, this is how big the baby is, and this is how, the organs are developing. And yeah, it is pretty fun. Thank you. Thank you all. All right. Anybody have any questions about what Vita, this will be my fourth. I have two that are they're teenagers, and then these two little babies. Yeah, it's really fun. Grandchildren are fun. Everybody tells you that, but it really is true. Those of you who have grandchildren or grandparents, you know what a special relationship that is. Yeah, it really is. All right. Anybody have any questions? Anything about what you've been learning? You know what, you're if you want to know more about something, I love it when you ask me questions that require me to do some research. Those are my favorites. So the ones where I go, oh, I don't know, that's a good question. Let me do some research. I'll find that out for next week. So always ask those. All right. So what we're going to do today is a case study, and we will talk a little bit more about the scientific method as we use this case study. But first, I have a couple of more pieces of information that I need to share. I try not to slam you all with it the first day, so we have to do a little bit each time. So just a heads up here. There have been some students who have told me that they were clicking on the link that says grades on the left side of the page. I'm going to show you what I mean. Oh, you can't see that yet. I didn't share it. Let me share the screen. So hold on. Okay, can you see that where it says anatomy and physiology? Yes. All right, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to drag this in so that you can see right here. This is what your homepage looks like. So there have been some students who have been clicking here where it says grades in order to find out what they have to do, what the assignments are that they have to do. I'm going to ask you not to do that because there could be some things in here that you don't have to do that maybe I've deleted, but they haven't been deleted from this part of Canvas, or there could be some things that you'll miss. The only thing that's going to show up here are the ones that are graded assignments that have a point value. And sometimes you'll do things that don't have any point value at all, but they're important. So don't go in that way. Another thing to not do, you also can click on the course calendar right here, and it gives you a good idea, especially if you're taking a lot of AIM Academy classes. You can click on all of yours here and see how much you have to do, but then still go, okay, well, I don't have much today, or I do have much today, but still go back to this anatomy homepage. And the way you want to find your assignments is one of two ways. Either click here where it says modules, or here where it says assignments. They both go to the same page, and it looks like this. You can collapse all of them by clicking the collapse all, so you just see your headings. You can expand all this way. Or you can just collapse them all and then expand just one, unit 2 cells. And then you can work your way down the list right here. That's the best way for you to make sure you don't miss anything. Now you can use grades also to see what your current grade is. And I recommend that you do that. It's going to be down here at the bottom. Now this is a fake student account that I created, so they haven't done anything. So this is going to be a 0, but hopefully yours will tell you a much higher than 0 average. And you can also see where it says missing so that you don't accidentally skip one. This is a good way for you to keep track of that. All right. Any questions about that? All right. I want to show you something that is new that I just started using. So going back to our homepage again, Right here where it says click above for class recordings, that's where you can always find the recordings that I make of our live classes. So if you ever miss a class, that's where you go in order to find the recordings. You can click on it and watch it right here in Canvas. You can make it bigger, fill it like that. And you can also click here to go to YouTube if you'd rather watch it directly on YouTube. No reason really to, it's the same. But you'll notice from now on, starting last week, underneath the video, there's going to be a meeting summary. Click here. Now this opens up an AI generated summary of our lesson. Now at the bottom, it will say AI generated content may be accurate or misleading, and it will. It doesn't get everything right. It does its best, but it's just AI. It's not a person saying, does that make sense or not? So don't necessarily take it. Don't say, oh, well, in the summary, it said that osmosis is this. Use the lessons. But if you think to yourself, I know we talked about osmosis and cell function, but I can't remember what we said in the live class. This is a good way for you to go back and get a quick recap of what we did. So I think it's a really nice feature that Zoom just added. All right. And finally, when you send me a message through Canvas inbox, most of you guys are doing really well with this, but please make sure that you give me everything that I need in order to answer your question. It's mostly the younger students, the middle school classes that I'm having trouble with, but Okay, so one more thing I want to talk about. I told a couple of you guys that we would discuss this plagiarism check. So keep in mind, we're all learning together. This is a new program that we're using. So when you submit your written exam or a paper or any kind of essay or things like that, you're going to get a written report about it. So I'm going to show you what one looks like in a different class that I have. So if I'm going to drag in my biology class here. So if I click on grades right there and scroll down, I'll see this arrow right here. This is what it looks like from your perspective. So you can see that if you click on that, it'll give you a report and it'll tell you. Now, this one has what's called a 7% match. So that means I've got a 7% match to things that are already on the internet. That's insignificant. Really, anything under 30, I'm not even going to look at, because there's only so many ways that you can say these kind of topics. If it's more than 30, I may contact you. Well, what I'll do first is I'll click on it and I'll say, okay, this has a 3% match to AIM Academy. You can then compare that and see, this is what came from Wikipedia here. And this is what is this right here. That came from Wikipedia. Well, that's such an insignificant amount. That's not going to be a flag for me. I'm going to be looking for like an entire answer that was copied and pasted. And honestly, I've got to tell you, after having used this for 3 weeks now, 2.5 weeks, I'm not really impressed with plagiarism check. I think it's flagging a lot of yours as being plagiarized when I take a look at it and they're clearly not. So we may abandon this altogether. It's an experiment that we're doing together. Just know that if your report's under 30%, don't even worry about it. If it's more than that, I'm going to go in and take a look at it. Most of the time, I'm going to say, yeah, this isn't plagiarism. If it is, I'm going to contact you. I will never just mark you wrong because I think that something might have been copied. We'll talk it over first. Okay. Finally, then, supplies needed. Please make sure that you look ahead at the supplies that you need for upcoming weeks. Now, some of the supplies, in fact, most of the supplies that I have listed in the supplies lists are, I'm going to show you what I mean again, drag this in. So when we look at modules here, you can see here at the beginning of these, there'll be, there's no supplies for that one. Supplies needed for Unit 4. Click on that. So Unit 4 isn't until September 19th, but that's not all that far away. So you can see the things that you need. Gallon of milk or water or something else that weighs 8 pounds and a ruler or a yardstick. You probably have those at home. But there may be some things that you need to buy and you don't want to wait till the last minute. When there's something that we'll need for a live class here, I'll give you plenty of advance notice. So you won't have to show up on Wednesday morning and say, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to have that. All right. Any questions about any of that? All right. I have one question that I want to ask all you guys. And here it is. I just launched it. Do you like the jokes and riddles at the beginning of class? Some students do, some students don't. Yes, I love them. I don't love them, but I'm not opposed to them. Or no, skip the jokes and get right to the class content. What do you think? Right. Almost everybody. 2 more people to answer. All right. I'm going to end the poll. Here we go. All right. The jokes are going to remain. 14 to 15 of you love them. Nobody hates them. So we will continue on with that. All right. Great. Good to know. Good to know. So that was my question about the joke. So here's your first joke. When does a brain feel afraid? When it loses its nerve. All right. How did the doctor cure the invisible man? He took him to the ICU. ICU. Yeah, I like that one too. All right. What has 13 hearts but no organs? 13 hearts but no organs. A deck of cards. Yeah, you're thinking human body, right? Or living thing at least. All right. I love this one because I like dogs. But we talked about the scientific method and how you do an experiment. You get a hypothesis, you do an experiment, and then you come to a conclusion. He says, "Who's a good boy?" So the dog runs some experiments. The results are in. It's me. They all think they are, right? They all think they are. Excellent. All right. We're going to do a couple of more get acquainted questions today. This will be the last day that we'll do this, but I do think it's good for us to get to know each other a little bit. So here is your first get acquainted question. Just type your answer, couple of words into the chat box. What crazy activity do you dream of trying someday? Skydiving. All right, bungee jumping, skydiving and bungee jumping, riding a bull. Wow. All right, cross country on a horse, more skydiving at night specifically. So what, the skydiving and bungee jumping into a valley at night? Well, that's specific. Nothing comes to mind. Yeah, I think skydiving is mine too. One of my brothers went skydiving and said it was an amazing experience. So we can have that all on our bucket list and check it off someday. All right. What 2 things do you consider yourself to be very good at? What comes to mind when you think I'm really good at X? School and tech stuff, wood burning, playing guitar and horse riding, running in school, cooking and dance, jujitsu and horse riding, talking to horses, cool, and climbing, art and bird watching, anything art, storytelling, skating and baking, being a goofball. That's a good thing to be good at. All right, our next obvious question then is, what 2 things do you consider yourself to be very bad at? Time to be humble. Math, soccer, skating and math, writing assignments, keeping a schedule, basketball, balance and math. A lot of math coming up here. Fortunately, there's not a whole lot of math in anatomy. Chemistry, physics, yeah, not so much in anatomy. Focusing, staying still, that's hard sometimes. Writing and organizing, sports, dancing and singing. All right, here is your next question. What is the weirdest food you've ever eaten? Crickets, fish eyes, ooh, iguana. Wow, I didn't know you could eat iguana. I've eaten crickets. I've eaten chocolate covered crickets. I've eaten earthworm cake. Those would probably be the 2 weirdest ones. Yeah, I guess in another country. Ice cream with dill pickles and cinnamon. Wow, that does sound odd. A scorpion. Is that also in another country, Emily?
No, I just had like a scorpion lollipop, like a lollipop with a scorpion inside of it.
Oh, wow. So did you just eat the candy and throw the scorpion away, or did you actually eat the scorpion?
I ate the scorpion. It tasted a
Oh,
little weird.
I bet. I bet. Excellent. All right. What kind of music do you guys like to listen to? Country? 90s rap? Metal and rock? Rock, Indian folk, metal, anything really. Eclectic taste. Pop, country, rock? Don't have a fave? Christian? Not sure. All right. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Last question now. Last question. What is your most treasured material possession? This is not a living thing. Something that is not a living thing. Your phone? Yeah, think the thing you would grab if you had to get out of your house quickly. My rice sock full of rice and lavender. Wow. I bet that smells good. My truck? My boots, speaker and car, favorite stuffed animal, sketchbooks. My Stanley. What's a Stanley, Arwa? Oh, a cup? Ah, my toy since I was 5, my Bible and record player. All right, very cool. My phone, got a couple phones there. All right, excellent. Makeup and jewelry and makeup box. Yeah, that's good. All right, let's move on now and do some actual science here. So today we're going to do a case study. We're going to do some case studies this year. I find case studies to be a really good way of learning about science doing real life examples. The study of the human body is really the perfect venue to do case studies. So our first case study is going to talk about Dolores Wells. So Dolores is a pregnant woman. She begins to have some symptoms that tell her that something is wrong. Her body is not in a state of homeostasis. So we're going to use this case study to discover some normal values and then compare them to what she's got so that we can learn about human health. We'll learn what normal means about as related to blood pressure, heart rate, body temperature, and then we'll look at some blood test results that she's had. Okay, so this is Dolores. She is a 28-year-old woman who lives in Portland, Oregon. She's in the second trimester of pregnancy. So we divide pregnancy into 3 parts: the first trimester, second trimester, third trimester. She's right in the middle. She's in the second. And her pregnancy has been progressing pretty normally so far, but recently she's noticed that she gets tired very easily and she gets short of breath or has trouble breathing even with the slightest exertion. So she's also experienced some periods of lightheadedness, but she hasn't passed out yet, no fainting. Other changes that she's noticed are cramping in her legs, a desire to chew on ice, and her tongue is sore. Now, she doubts that all these symptoms are related to one another, but she's concerned, and she makes an appointment to see her physician, Dr. Burke. Is this a real case? So no, this is not a real case, but it's based on reality. This probably happens all the time. Not all that uncommon a scenario here. Okay, tires easily, short of breath, lightheaded, cramps in her legs, a desire to crunch on ice, and a sore tongue. Now she goes to Dr. Burke's office, and Dr. Burke's nurse takes her history, asking her a lot of questions about her general health and the current symptoms that she's experiencing now. Then the doctor checks her vital signs. Anybody know what we mean when we say vital signs?
Like heart rate, respiratory rate, blood pressure, things like that.
Yep. Yep, very good. You got 3 of them. So basically, when we talk about heart rate, this is what we mean: body temperature, heart rate, blood pressure, and respiratory rate. So let's see here. Now, the first thing that the nurse does is place this thermometer under Dolores's tongue. Her temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. Anybody know what that is in Fahrenheit? Can anybody do the quick? 37 degrees Fahrenheit, Celsius is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Very good, Ben. Yeah, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So now we're going to look at what hers is. She's 98.6. what we need to do is know what normal is. So we have to compare to a chart of normal. So there are different ways to test body temperature in different ages. So you can take a look there, a couple different ways that we test them orally. That's what we did with Dolores. Rectal, that means putting it into her rectum. Axillary is under the arm. Ear is what they're mostly using now. You know, they shine that thing into your ear. And then core. We'll talk about how core is found here in a second. So why wouldn't we do oral on somebody? Well, say under the age of 2, they really don't do an oral temperature. They don't put a thermometer under the tongue of a 1.5-year-old. Why not?
Because they might choke.
Yeah, well, they might swallow it and choke on it. They might take a bite. They don't hold still. Yeah, exactly. So there would be too wiggly and it wouldn't be an accurate measurement. Yeah, exactly. You're all correct. So they usually are going to use either a rectal or an ear thermometer on a baby under the age of 2. Now that core temperature at the bottom, that is the temperature of the internal organs. It's the temperature of your liver, the temperature of the organs that are inside your body, deep inside the body. Now, usually a core temperature is going to be about a degree or 2 higher than temperature on the outside. So it takes a special kind of thermometer. But of the rest of these, what do you think is closest to core temperature? Which one of the top 4 do you think is closest to core? Yeah, the rectal is closest to core because we're actually measuring the temperature on the inside. The rest of them are more surface oriented. So Dolores is 28 years old. So take a look there and tell me, with an oral thermometer at 28 years old, what's normal for her? Right here, 97.6 to 99.6. She's right here in the middle between 11 and 65, and it's an oral temperature that we're taking here. So she is 98.6. Is she normal? Does she have a fever? Right, she does not have a fever. She's got normal temperature. So sometimes you'll hear people say, do you have a temperature? The answer to that is always yes. We always have a temperature. The correct way to ask it is, do you have a fever? A fever is a higher than normal temperature, but everyone always has a temperature. So these are these infrared thermometers, and when they're used correctly, infrared thermometers are actually very, very accurate. They're almost as accurate as an oral or a rectal thermometer. All right, now let's take a look at the respiratory rate. So when the nurse listened to the amount of times that she breathed in 1 minute, and when you go to the doctor, at some point while you're there, they're doing that. They're checking your respiratory rate. They can't tell you they're doing it though, because think about respiration. As soon as I say to you, how is your breathing? You're now in control of your breathing. You're consciously thinking about your breathing, and it's not going to be an accurate number. So while they're doing something else, they're checking your respiratory rate, the amount of times that you breathe in a minute. Now, when they took Dolores's respiratory rate, they found that it was 26 breaths per minute. Yes, newborns breathe very quickly. They have a high newborn, just about everything in newborn is high. Their pulse is high. Their temperature can be a little bit higher than normal. Their respiratory rate is high. Blood pressure is usually not, but. So hers is 26 breaths per minute. Is that normal? Yeah, it's a little bit high. So for her, as an adult, between 12 and 20 per minute is normal. Hers is 26. So that's a little bit on the high side. So something's causing her to breathe a little bit more quickly than normal. Now, the doctor then, or the nurse then used a blood pressure cuff. It's called a sphygmomanometer. Don't you love that name? Sphygmomanometer, to figure out what her blood pressure is. So what they do with this is they pump air into this cuff right here, and that compresses the arteries that are in her arm, stopping the blood from moving through her arm. So stopping the flow of blood. While that's happening, the nurse is listening with this stethoscope. They place this part of the stethoscope right in the bend of the arm and slowly begin to release the air from the cuff. Now, as soon as the nurse starts to hear that blood moving through the artery, they write down that number. That's the top number. So when they listen to Dolores, they start hearing it at 119. So 119 is her top number. When the nurse stops hearing blood flowing through, she notes that number too. So for Dolores, she hears it stop at 78. So Dolores's blood pressure is 119 over 78. So I want you to watch this video. How do you know the number? You're looking at this gauge. So there will be a gauge. It's usually right on this right here. It's not really showing it right here, but they're looking at a gauge, or there could be a gauge on the wall. A lot of times when you go to the doctor's office, they'll have that big thing. The readout will be on the wall and you'll see that. All right, I want you to watch this video about what blood pressure actually means, and then we'll talk about hers.
The force of blood on artery walls is called blood pressure. Normal pressure is important for the proper flow of blood from the heart to the body's organs and tissues. Each heartbeat forces blood to the rest of the body. Near the heart, pressure is higher, and away from it, lower. Blood pressure depends on many things, including how much blood the heart is pumping and the diameter of the arteries the blood is moving through. Generally, the more blood that's pumped and the narrower the artery, the higher the pressure is. Blood pressure is measured both as the heart contracts, which is called systole, and as it relaxes, which is called diastole. Systolic blood pressure is measured when the heart ventricles contract. Diastolic blood pressure is measured when the heart ventricles relax. A systolic pressure of 115 millimeters of mercury is considered normal, as is a diastolic pressure of 70. Commonly, this pressure would be stated as 115 over 70.
I love the way the little guy blinks in the video. But all of that will mean more when we start talking about the heart and blood vessels later. But just for now, understand it's the pressure of the blood on the vessels that come out of the heart and go to the body. Now, the sounds that you hear when you take blood pressure are called Korotkoff sounds. And they're caused by the turbulence, think the roughness of the flow when the blood pressure cuff compresses the artery. They can vary. It could be like a tapping sound, a swooshing, or a muffle, and then they stop. Then they stop altogether. So the pressure at which the very first Korotkoff sound is heard is called systolic, and the pressure at which you don't hear anything anymore is called diastolic. And these are named after the Russian physician who discovered them. The pressure when you first hear the sound. Yeah. So, get here. Now, this is a chart from the American Heart Association. Remember that Dolores is 119 over 78. Is her blood pressure considered normal? (119 over 78). Yep, this would be normal. 119 over 78, anything up to that is considered normal. Interestingly enough, it's really not, unless you get real low blood pressure tends not to be a big problem. Sometimes it can make people a little bit dizzy, and there are some conditions that will result in blood pressure. There's one called POTS. You may know somebody who's got POTS, postural orthostatic hypertensive syndrome. Yeah, so that can cause your blood pressure to drop, and that can cause problems. The dropping, but generally having a little bit lower than normal blood pressure is not a problem. It's when you get up into the high blood pressure and especially hypertensive crisis that there's a problem. Dolores doesn't have that. She's fine. She's normal. So what do we have so far? Her temperature is normal. Her respiratory rate's a little bit high. Her blood pressure is normal. The next thing we're going to check now is how fast is her heart beating? What is her pulse? So to find her pulse, the nurse places her first two fingers on the inside of Dolores' wrist, finds the heartbeat. So you can probably find your own. You can probably feel your own. You don't want to have your wrist back like this. You want to have it in a relaxed position, and you can feel your own heartbeat. You don't want to press down, because if you press, you'll compress the vessel. It's a little bit harder to find one on your own than on somebody else. But what the nurse does is place the two fingers on the inside of Dolores' wrist and find the heartbeat, and then count the number of times her heart beats in 1 minute. Now, a lot of time, yeah, it is easier to find on your neck, Lane. You're right about that. Yep. Yep. You can maybe be able to find it on the inside of the wrist or the elbow too. Sometimes that's a possibility too. So they're going to count how many times it beats in 1 minute. But usually what they'll do is count for 15 seconds and then multiply by 4, or count for 30 and multiply by 2. So Dolores's heart is found to be beating 120 times per minute. So once again, we need to know what normal is. So we take a look at a chart. Now there's a little bit of controversy about that. So you can understand, you know, like what is considered a good heart rate. Different charts, different resources are going to have different charts. But let's take a look here at right here. So that let's look here at the age that a person is. No, this is the heart rate. Sorry, where ages are over here. So let's look at the age on here. She's not a man, she's a woman. The male and female heartbeat is different. So at the age that she is, she's 26 years old, 28 years old. So we're going to be looking right here. Now her heart rate is 120 beats per minute. What do you think? High, normal, low? It is very high. Yeah, it's pretty high. So even poor is 83 or above. So she's got a very high heart rate. All right. Now, if you want to try your own, we could do that. You can place your first 2 fingers on the inside of your wrist or on your heart, on your, you can just, so if you feel your Adam's apple right here, just to the outside of your Adam's apple, again, don't press really hard. It's actually high, but it's not insanely high. Our heart rate can get a lot higher than that. And if you take a look here at right here for, well, we don't have newborns on this. They only have adults on this. A newborn's heart rate will be somewhere around 140 beats per minute. Yeah, so depending on how old you are. Okay, so if you want to do your own, you can feel it, and I'll count for 15 seconds. So if you guys want to check your heart rate, you can go ahead and do that. And hold on, I'm gonna get my clock on. Okay, ready, get set, go. Stop. Okay, that was 15 seconds. So whatever your number was, multiply that by 4. And that will give you your heart rate. 88's pretty, well, let's take a look. Let's take a look at the chart. So Anna, you tell me. So find yourself. Are you in, you know, like what kind of condition are you in? If you're an athlete, your heart rate is usually lower. So you guys are going to be right here, and they don't go younger than 18, but you can look at that. It'd be pretty close for you to that. So if you're an athlete, you can expect to be somewhere between the 49 and 55, maybe up to like 65. Average would be between 70 and 73. A little bit high if it's between 74 and 81. But again, these are for men. So you can see here the numbers for women are slightly different, especially at different ages. Yep, drinking coffee is going to speed your heart rate up. We'll talk about coffee later in the year, but it will speed your heart rate. Yep. All right, let's move on now to talk about Dolores again. So a lot of times, rather than doing the, you know, the holding onto the finger, the wrist, or feeling here, they'll use this device. This is called an oximeter. And it will tell not only your pulse, it also will tell the oxygen levels in your blood. It's pretty cool the way this works. How does this device know what the oxygen levels in your blood are? What it does is it shines a light through your fingertip. If you've got one of those, you can see the red light that's shining through there, or might be like a blue kind of light. Well, the device will analyze the light that passes all the way through your finger, and they can tell by how much light passes through what the percent of oxygen in your red blood cells is. So that's a pretty cool technology. Now, these are pretty common for home use. You can buy these for less than $20. People who have breathing issues will often have these, and they keep an eye on their oxygen levels. So healthy oxygen level is going to be somewhere between 95 and 100. This one's low. This person's got a problem. Now, if they drop below 95, then usually they're having some symptoms. They're having trouble breathing. They might even have confusion. So if you're using an oximeter at home and your oxygen levels get below 92, they usually say that you should call the doctor right away. If it gets below 88, you need to get to the emergency room immediately because that's pretty low. So this one is too low right here. But there is some other information that we can get by feeling that we can't get through one of these devices. Anybody have any idea what might we tell by feeling the pulse as opposed to just looking at it on this device? Yeah, how strong it is. Yep. Strong pulse and a weak pulse are very different and they indicate different things. Also, how regular it is. So if a person has a heart that beats like dun, 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 that's an irregular heartbeat. That's one that's skipping some beats. That could be a problem too. All right, so with Dolores, the nurse now leaves and now the doctor comes back into the room. Dr. Burke enters and looks in Dolores's mouth and nose, feels her neck, feels under her arms. Anybody have any idea what they're feeling for when they feel your neck and under your arms? Lymph nodes, yeah. Lymph nodes are little filters that are in your body that filter the fluid that comes out of your blood vessels. And then they go into lymph arteries or lymph vessels, and they go through these lymph nodes, and it takes out like some of the stuff that isn't supposed to be there. So they're really awesome filters. What's really cool about lymph nodes is they're self-cleaning. So if any of you have filters on any devices in your home, like you've got maybe a filter on your refrigerator for the water, and you have to replace that filter every so often, what engineers would give to have a self-cleaning filter, you've got them all over your body. But when they are collecting things, when they're full of the stuff that they filtered out of the blood, they can enlarge. They can get a little bit bigger. So that's what the doctor's feeling for, is large, enlarged or tender lymph nodes. Now, after asking a few more questions, Dr. Burke orders some blood tests. The nurse comes back in, takes some blood from Dolores's arm into this tube, and then sends the tube to the lab to be analyzed. The next day, Dolores goes back to the doctor's office to get the results of her tests. So these are the values that she has. This is what they see. When they looked at how many red blood cells she has 3.5 million per cubic millimeter. What is her hemoglobin? I'm gonna tell you what all this means in a minute. Her hemoglobin is 7. Her hematocrit is 30%. She has low iron, low mean corpuscular volume, low mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration, and high total iron binding capacity. Now, we have to learn what those mean. You're right about low iron, yeah. So again, we're going to learn a lot about what these mean in a couple months when we study about blood, but I just want to talk about the basics right now. And note that sometimes these are called markers. Sometimes they're called values, sometimes they're called markers. So if you hear somebody talking about your blood markers, what they mean is the levels that they're finding when they look for certain things in your blood. All right, so first let's look at red blood cells. Normal red blood cell count in men is 4.7 to 6.1 million cells per cubic milliliter. Normal red blood cells in women is slightly less, 4.2 to 5.4 million per cubic millimeter. Now, red blood cells are they're the cells that circulate in your blood and carry oxygen through your blood. That's their primary goal, is to carry oxygen through the blood. Yeah, so she's a bit low. Yep, we can see that. So take a look at the shape of this red blood cell here. I think red blood cells are pretty cool. They look a little bit like donuts that have been like flattened, like a cushion that's been flattened. So anybody have any idea, have you ever learned why red blood cells have that shape? Let me tell you this, they're round and spherical when they're first formed. So they're formed in your bone marrow. Yeah, you got it, Anastasia. They kick out their nucleus. Very soon after they're formed, they eject their nucleus to give them more room for what's called hemoglobin, which is a protein that holds on to the oxygen. So they get rid of that nucleus. Think about what that means to a cell when it doesn't have a nucleus. It can never regenerate. It can't reproduce. So red blood cells do not make new red blood cells. All the red blood cells have to be made in the bone marrow. All right, so we've got these red blood cells that carry oxygen. The red blood cell count basically tells us how many of them there are in that sample of blood. So in the sample that they did, for every cubic millimeter, there were 3.5 million cells. That's low for her. So this is just one of the tests that they do when they do what's called a CBC, or complete blood count. They'll do this almost every time you have blood run. They'll be testing for how many red blood cells you have. So they can use the, they don't have DNA. You're right, Anastasia. Since there's no nucleus, there's no DNA. Yep. They don't really do anything except carry oxygen. Now, what's interesting though, is of all the cells in your body, you know, red blood cells make up about 80%. Yeah, of all the trillions of cells, there's somewhere around 40 trillion cells in the average adult, and 80% of those are red blood cells. Yeah, they're pretty important, but they don't have the ability to regenerate themselves, which is what DNA does. So the results of a red blood cell count can be used to diagnose conditions that are related to your blood. So if there's fewer than normal, if there's more than normal. So there's a couple things that could be indicated by a low red blood cell count. It could be a vitamin B12 or folate deficiency. It could signal internal bleeding. If somebody's bleeding on the inside, you might not see it, but their blood in their vessels is going to be lower. It could indicate kidney disease. It could indicate iron deficiency anemia. It could indicate malnutrition, where their diet just doesn't have enough nutrients in order to meet their body's needs. All right, now let's look at the next one here, hemoglobin. Lane says, my brother had blood clots in his legs and lungs, and he had to get more blood because he lost so much with the samples they were taking for some reason. He had multiple surgeries. Yeah, well, fortunately, giving blood is an option to be able, once you're 17 years old, you guys can donate blood. I highly recommend that. It's something I do that is makes me feel like I'm saving lives, because it can. We'll talk more about all this when we get to the blood unit, but what's hemoglobin? So hemoglobin is that iron containing protein that's inside the red blood cells. This is what allows the red blood cells to carry oxygen. Oxygen binds to hemoglobin, and then it's carried throughout the body. Once it gets to the cells in the body that need oxygen, the hemoglobin lets go, and the oxygen then moves into those cells. It also helps to carry a little bit of carbon dioxide, not much of your carbon dioxide, but a little bit. It also can help to, well, let's move on. So what's normal? Let's look at normal range for hemoglobin. Normal for men is 13.5 to 17.5 grams for every deciliter of blood that they take. For women, it's 12 to 15.5. So take a look at her hemoglobin. What do you think? High, normal, low? She's low. Yeah, she's significantly low. She's 7 when the low end of normal is 12. Most of the time for these figures, when they have a range, you want to be right in the middle of the range. Well, right in the middle of the range would be what, 13 and a half, 14. So she's pretty low. She's almost half of what's normal. Now, low hemoglobin levels can indicate a couple different things, really all the things that we talked about before. And low hemoglobin levels can lead to symptoms like being tired all the time. We call that fatigue, trouble breathing from low hemoglobin. So now let's talk about hematocrit. That's the next one on the list. Hematocrit is a test that measures the proportion of your blood that's made up of red blood cells. So what proportion is there? So remember, blood has more than just red blood cells in it. It has plasma. It has white blood cells in it. It has some platelets in it that stop bleeding. Plasma is the fluid component of your blood. All those things together make up the volume of your blood. What proportion of that whole volume of blood is made up of red blood cells? That's what hematocrit is. So what's normal hematocrit? For men, it is 41 to 50. For women, it is 36 to 48. What's her hematocrit? Low, normal, high? Low. Yep, it is going to be low. So low red blood cell count, low hematocrit generally is going to indicate a lot of the same things that we talked about before. All right, Next, we have serum iron. So iron is one of those really essential nutrients that is necessary for the production of red blood cells. Hemoglobin is made up of iron. Red blood cells have hemoglobin to carry oxygen. If you don't have enough iron in your body, you can't make the hemoglobin, you can't have hemoglobin in your red blood cells. So the body can't make iron. Say that again, it can't make its own iron. You have to get iron from the food that you eat or from supplements. So the total serum iron is going to measure the amount of iron that's in the liquid portion of your blood. Now, so look there now at what hers is. It just says low. We have some ranges right there. We don't really know what hers is, but we know that her iron is low. Now, abnormally low iron levels might mean either that you haven't been eating enough or your body isn't absorbing it. If your body's not able to absorb a nutrient, it doesn't matter how much you're eating, it's not going to matter. So one of those two things is a possibility here. Now, the next one is MCV, mean corpuscular volume. So there's three main types of blood cells in your blood. There's red blood cells, carry oxygen. There's white blood cells, which are part of your immune system, and they fight off invaders. And then there's platelets that help to stop bleeding. Well, an MCV measures the average size of your red blood cells. So red blood cells going to carry oxygen. You need them to be the right size. If they're too small, it could be an indication of a blood disorder like vitamin deficiency, anemia, or some other medical condition. If they're too big, it can also be a sign of a problem. So when a person has an MCV below 80, that suggests that they are probably going to have what's called microcytic anemia, a type of anemia where the red blood cells just aren't big enough. They're not big enough to carry the oxygen that they need. And hers would be low, so it would be under that 80 number that is abnormal. All right, so next we have mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration, and then total iron binding capacity. We're running low on time, so I'm not going to spend time talking about what those are. Just understand that if they fall into low ranges, if this one falls into low ranges, that indicates that your blood isn't able to carry the oxygen that it needs to carry. All right. Now, there's a number of symptoms that people will have if they have that low MCHC, and those are things like fatigue, chronic tiredness, shortness of breath, pale skin, they bruise easily. And people, even with people who have very, very low levels that only slightly off of normal, might not have any symptoms at all, but we know Dolores does. All right, and then total iron binding capacity, that's the amount of proteins in your blood that can bind to iron. So hers is high in that. Now, keep in mind, all the markers don't have to be off in order to indicate a pattern. We don't look at this and say, oh, well, her total iron binding capacity is high, so her iron must be fine. We can tell her iron is not fine, it's low. So all the markers don't have to be wrong. So now when we look again at just the markers, we know that her temperature is normal, her blood pressure was normal, her heart rate was high, her respiratory rate was high, and we can see this blood work. So was there anything that came up regularly that you guys think could be the problem in a pregnant woman? Any guesses? What could be the problem? So no, usually that's a good guess though, Lane. Usually during pregnancy, I mean, the body works really hard during pregnancy. And it works really hard to maintain that homeostasis. So in general, if everything is normal, the baby isn't going to take enough from the mother to cause a problem for the mother in general. Have any of you guys ever had anemia? Been anemic or heard about anemia? So that's most likely the cause. Some of the other things that we talked about were kidney disease. Odds are pretty good she doesn't have kidney disease because of her age. That usually is something that comes along later. Most of the other things that we talked about could be a possibility. Anemia is the most likely. So let's take a look at anemic blood. So you can see there in normal blood, there's a lot of those red blood cells and there's normal hemoglobin in them. Anemic blood could have fewer red blood cells or low hemoglobin in a normal amount of red blood cells or low hemoglobin in a low amount of red blood cells. So it could have both, not enough cells and not enough hemoglobin in them. So anemia is something that is not uncommon in pregnant women. Part of the reason for that is, like I said, we don't make iron. So if the mother isn't eating enough iron for herself and the baby, that's where homeostasis gets imbalanced. She's not consuming enough iron to meet both of their needs. So as it turns out, that is what she has. She has iron deficiency anemia. She doesn't have enough healthy red blood cells to provide oxygen. So keep in mind, when she's pregnant, she needs about twice as much iron as she does when she's not. So her body has to take in twice as much iron in order to be able to meet her needs. So you guys have any idea what foods are high in iron that she should be eating? Red meat, real high. That's probably one of the best sources of iron. Yep, some of the dark leafy, dark colored vegetables, fish, meat, spinach, broccoli, good. Yep. Poultry and fish are also really good. Well, you got fish there. Yeah. The ones that come from animal products are the best because the iron that's in animal products is very easily absorbed. There is iron in plant products as well, but it's not as easily absorbed. So you really, it's best to be getting your iron from animal products like red meat, poultry, and fish. But there's also some foods, dried beans and peas, they do have some iron in them. Prune juice is pretty high in iron. And usually when a woman is pregnant, because she needs twice as much iron, usually when a woman is pregnant, she's going to be taking a supplement that's going to have iron in a pill form to give her enough iron that she needs. All right, I think we're going to have to stop there. I didn't get to the scientific method stuff. Maybe we'll do that next time. Let me see here. All right, we have time for one quick, I have a quick little case study about organelles. So this is just like a 2-minute thing that we're going to do. Maybe throw one of these in each time. All right, so let's read this. Trevor is a 20. Oh, anybody have any questions first about Dolores or her situation? All right. So Trevor is a 20-year-old male who has suffered from repeated episodes of, look at this, hemolytic anemia, another anemic. During these episodes, Trevor's red blood cell count drops off dramatically due to rupturing of large number of cells. Hemolytic means that it's breaking down the red blood cells. Lytic means to break or to explode or, destroy. So he has rupturing of large number of cells and the inability of his bone marrow to replace the ruptured cells fast enough. When Trevor comes to a clinic for treatment, he's diagnosed initially with a hereditary deficiency, meaning he's born with not enough of this enzyme, glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. But then biochemical tests rule that out. That's not what they find. An examination of his blood reveals that many of his red blood cells have an elliptical shape. So instead of being round, they're elliptical, they're more oval in shape. That leads to a diagnosis of hereditary elliptocytosis. Structures within the red blood cells alter the shape of the cell from its normal biconcave disc to an elliptical shape, causing premature damage and rupture of the cells. All right, now think about what's inside the cell. This is an organelle related problem that he has. What organelle holds the cell's shape and might be malfunctioning to cause his blood cells to be an elliptical shape? You guys remember when you were studying the organelles in a cell? What gives the cell its shape? Not a membrane in a plant, or the cell wall in a plant is going to give it shape, but a membrane doesn't really. Membranes are very soft. Yeah, it's the cytoskeleton. Very good, cytoskeleton. So remember, inside each cell, you have this network of protein fibers, and they give the cell its shape, as well as holding the organelles together within the cell. So the cytoskeleton was malfunctioning in this hereditary elliptocytosis. All right, very good. All right. Anybody have any questions? All right, have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.